The snow came down black with cinders that last night, and I stood on a wall I already knew we could not hold, counting the torches of men who had come to kill everything I loved. There were too many to count. That was the point of them. The reavers filled the pass from rock to rock, a gray flood, their fires smeared across the dark like a wound that would not close, and their horns had been going since dusk in the flat, patient way of men who know they have already won and are only waiting for the losers to understand it. My own horns had stopped answering hours ago. There is a point in a long siege when the horns stop meaning anything except that you are still, for now, alive. And we had reached that point 3 days past and walked on through it because there was nothing else to do. 91, Osric said beside me. I did not have to ask what he meant. 91 dawns. I had carved a mark into the granite of the gatehouse for each one, 91 strokes worn into the stone with the point of my knife, one for every morning the sun had come up over Stormwatch Hold and found us still holding the pass. It had become a small private rite between the two of us, the carving. Each gray dawn I would climb down off the wall with my hands shaking from cold and killing, and Osric would already be there with the lamp, and I would cut the day into the stone, and neither of us would say the thing we both thought, which was, and how many more? 91, I agreed. He was old enough to be my father and had buried 2 alphas before me, and there was no fear left in him, only a great tiredness and under it something harder than any weapon in the armory. They'll come at the gate before the moon turns, he said. 3rd time tonight. They've learned it's thin there. It's thin everywhere. He spat over the wall into the dark, but thinnest there. Below us and behind us lay the whole reason for it. Stormwatch sat astride the only pass through the Ashfell Mountains, a fist of gray stone jammed into the throat of the range, and behind that fist lay every valley my pack had ever called home, every hearth, every den, every green and gentle place my people would run to if the wall came down. My father had held this pass, and his mother before him, back and back through more generations than I could name, and it had never once broken. That was the whole of my inheritance and the whole of my duty, and across 91 days I had learned to the ounce exactly what it weighed. The reavers were not wolves. People forget that now, the story softened by the years into something cleaner. They were men out of the far north, driven down off their own dying lands by a hunger as old as winter, and they fought the way men fight when they have already lost everything and have nothing left in the world but the taking of yours. You cannot frighten that. You cannot reason with it. You can only stand in front of it until one of you is gone, and there were a very great many of them, and there was only one of me, and behind me there were 40 children. Havard. I turned. My brother was coming up the wall stair 2 steps at a time, 16 years old and furious about every year of it, a short blade at his hip that I had forbidden him to draw, and that he drew at every chance the war gave him. They're moving the wounded down to the Undercroft, Imric said, breathless, snow melting in his dark hair. The healers say the East Tower's going. There's a crack up the whole height of it now, you can put your arm in it to the elbow. Cold went through me that the mountain had nothing to do with. The East Tower anchored the inner wall. If it came down, it would take a span of the wall with it, and behind that span, cut down into the living root of the mountain, lay the Undercroft, and in the Undercroft we had put everyone who could not fight. The old, the hurt, and the pups, 40 children of the Ashfell pack, some of them still small enough to carry sleeping in the crook of one arm, all of them mine to keep breathing. Down there, I told him, Rick. Now, help them move the little ones deeper past the well into the far vault into the deep stone. Do you understand me? Not just off the wall, deep. I want to hold the wall with you. His jaw was set the way our fathers used to set. I can fight. You've seen me. I have seen you. I put my hand to the back of his neck, the way our father used to take mine, and for one breath the whole grinding war went quiet enough that I could feel how young the bones of him still were under my palm, how much of him was not yet grown. That's exactly why I'm not sending you to the wall. Anyone can swing a blade on a wall. It takes my brother to keep 40 frightened children from bolting the wrong way into the dark when the stone starts screaming. That's the harder duty, and it's the one I trust to my own blood. Go, keep them deep. Keep them together. Keep them yours until I come down. He went. He was a good boy, better than I was at his age, gentler, though he'd have fought me for saying it. I watched him take the stair down into the torchlit yard and vanish toward the Undercroft mouth, and I did not know, could not have known, that I had just sent my brother into the precise place the mountain had chosen to break. I turned back to the Reavers, and the Reavers came at the gate. I will not spend your patience on the fighting at the gate, because there is nothing in it worth the keeping. It is enough to say that we held it. It is enough to say that holding it cost us men I had known my whole life, men whose fathers had carved dawns into other stones in other wars, and that when the gray tide finally sucked back down the pass to gather itself for the next throw, I was leaning on a spear that was the only thing between me and the ground, with blood freezing in my hair that I hoped to the moon was not all my own. And it was in that ragged, ringing quiet after, the false quiet the war left between its blows, when you could hear your own heart again, and the moans of the wounded and the wind, that I let myself think, for the first time in hours, of her. I did not know it was of her I was thinking. That is the truth of this story, and I have never dressed it up, not for my pack and not for her. I did not know her. I did not know her name. What rose in my exhausted mind in that gap between assaults was only a small warm image with no name attached to it, the way you carry the memory of a kindness done to you by a stranger. A plain woman kneeling in the Undercroft with a bowl of clean water, binding the shattered arm of one of my youngest warriors while the boy wept, and talking to him the whole time in a low, even voice about nothing at all, about the weather, about a soup she meant to make, until the boy stopped weeping and started, incredibly, to laugh. I had seen her do that, days ago, weeks. I had come down into the Undercroft gray with killing to look on my wounded, because a king owes his wounded his face at the least, and I had stood in the doorway unseen and watched a brown-haired woman I did not know coax a laugh out of a boy who had lost the use of his sword hand. And I had thought, I am ashamed of the smallness of it now. I had thought, good, that one's useful, and I had gone back up to the wall. That was the whole of what I knew of Neve on the 91st night, that she was useful. That she was one of the refugees who had come up the pass ahead of the Reavers in the autumn and been trapped in the hold when the fighting closed the roads behind her, and that she had made herself quietly indispensable in the Undercroft, and that I had never once in 91 days asked her name. Let me tell you how she came, because I have learned it since, every step of it, from the ones who were on the gate that autumn day. I have made them tell it to me over and over, greedy for every scrap of her I missed, and I will give it to you the way it was given to me. She came up the pass in the last good week of autumn, before the snows, in a straggling line of folk fleeing the northern valleys ahead of a rumor of gray men. Most of the refugees who reached us that season were half mad with fear and loss, and no one blamed them for it. Neve, they tell me, was not. She came up the last league of the pass carrying an old woman's pack as well as her own, one on each shoulder, because the old woman could no longer carry it, and when the gate guard asked her business, she set both packs down and straightened her back, and said she could bind a wound and sit a deathbed and cook for 40 as easily as for 4, and asked where she was needed. Not whether there was room for her, not whether she would be fed, where she was needed. The gate captain, a hard man, dead now, Moon keep him, told me years later that he'd been turning refugees back that week, that the hold was already full and the winter coming and every mouth a gamble. He'd meant to turn her back too. And then she'd said that, where am I needed, standing there with 2 packs and no fear and no demand, and he had found he could not do it. He sent her to the Undercroft. He said he did not know why. He said something about her made a man ashamed to say no. I did not thank him for it that autumn. I did not even hear of it. A refugee found useful in the Undercroft was so far beneath the notice of an alpha king fighting for the survival of his whole people that it did not rise to me at all. She came into my hold. The other half of my own soul walked in through my own gate carrying an old woman's pack, and I was up on the wall counting torches, and I never felt a thing. She worked all winter. This too I have since learned in full, hoarding it. When the fever sickness went through the crowded Undercroft in the black heart of the year, she sat up with the sick nights on end and did not take it herself, or took it and hid it and worked through it. No one is sure which, and she will not say. When a birth came hard, for there were births even then, even there, life being stubborn, it was Neve the old healer called for, though Neve had no training, only steady hands and a steadier nerve. When men died of their wounds, and men did, she was the one who sat with them at the end, because she had discovered a thing that most people flee from, that no one should die alone, and that she could bear to be the one who stayed. She held the hands of my dying warriors and told them their king was proud of them, which I was, and which I had never told them because I was on the wall. She learned all their names, every one, the whole roster of my wounded, and the pups, and the old. She knew each of them by name and by nature, knew which pup would not sleep without a song, and which old man liked his broth with the last of the winter time, knew the boy with the ruined sword hand well enough to make him laugh. She learned the name of every soul in my hold. And no one learned hers, because no one thought to ask, because she never asked them to, because a woman who spends herself entirely on others teaches the careless world, without meaning to, that she requires nothing back, and the careless world, moon forgive it, believes her. I was the most careless of all. I was the king. It was my hold, my pack, my duty to know the name of every soul who suffered and served under my roof, and there was one soul under my roof suffering and serving more than any other, and I did not know her name until the night she chose to die for my children. But I run ahead. Let me go back to the wall, to the false quiet, to the small, warm, nameless image in my tired mind, and to the sound that ended everything. The East Tower came down. I did not see it begin. I heard it. I have heard many terrible sounds in my life, and none like this one before or since. A groan that started deep in the stone under my own boots and climbed, until it was a roar, until it was the whole mountain clearing its throat to speak. And then the East Tower folded. It did not topple outward like a felled tree. It sat down, all at once, straight into its own foundations, in a single hammer blow of rock and dust and pluming snow that punched the wind clean out of the whole hold at once, so that for one heartbeat there was no sound at all, only the ringing after. And it took the wall with it, exactly as I had feared. A span of the inner wall gone between one breath and the next, and where the wall had stood there was now a breach the width of a barn, ragged and smoking with stone dust, open to the pass, open to the reavers, and open, straight down through the collapsed floor and the broken vaulting, to the Undercroft, to the deep place where I had sent every helpless soul I loved, to where I had sent my brother not 1 hour before. I was moving before the dust had settled. I have run all my life. I have never in my life run like I ran then. I went off the wall by the broken stair, half falling, and across the yard through a fog of grinding stone dust, so thick I steered by memory and by sound. And the sound was children screaming, and I have never heard anything I wanted less to run toward or could less have stopped myself from. The breach had torn the Undercroft's near vault open to the sky. Half the roof of it was gone. Through the ragged gap I could see the raw black of the mountain's broken bone, and above it the paler black of the sky, and the cinder snow still falling through it all, and I could see the pups. They had been moving them, Emric and the healers, moving them deeper the way I'd said, and the collapse had come down between the near vault and the deep, and cut a dozen of the smallest off on the wrong side of it, out under the broken open roof, a huddle of little ones pressed back against the last standing wall with nowhere left to go. I saw my brother among them, on his feet, his short blade drawn at last with my blessing this time, 16 years old and putting himself between a dozen pups and the sky. And I saw the reavers. They were already in the breach, of course they were. A gap that size torn in a wall they had battered for 91 days. They came through it the way water finds the crack in a dam, 3 of them, then 5, then more, up and over the smoking rubble with their torches and their long north knives, into the very heart of my hold at last. And between those knives and the cut-off pups and my brother there was the width of the near vault and nothing else. No, not nothing. There was a woman. I want to be able to tell you that I knew her then. That across that ruined torchlit vault, over the heads of the reavers, through the falling ash, something in me leapt up and named her, that the bond I had gone all my life without struck me like lightning the instant I laid eyes on her in her danger. It would make a cleaner tale. Every version told since tries to give me that, and I let none of them because it is a lie, and she was never a woman a man should honor with lies. I did not know her. I saw only a plain brown-haired woman in a gray dress standing between the reavers and the children, and my first coherent thought was despair, because she had nothing, no blade, no shield, nothing but a flat length of ashwood in her 2 hands, a splint board the healers used to set broken legs, a stick meant for the mending of bones. That was her whole armament against 5 armed men, a mending stick. And she did not run. She could have run. The gap through to the deep vault was behind her. She could have gone through it into the stone and the safety, and left the cut-off pups to whatever the moon willed, and not one soul in the world would ever have known she'd had the choice, because not one soul in the world was watching a refugee woman in the dark at the end of everything. I did not even know her name. She could have saved herself in perfect anonymity and lived, and no one would ever have thought the worse of her, because to think the worse of her they would first have had to think of her at all. She planted her feet in the rubble, and she set her body square between the north knives and my children, and when the first reaver came at her, she brought that ash board across his face with every ounce of strength that was in her. I heard the crack of it. Across the whole thundering ruin of that night, I heard the crack of a healer's splint against a raider's skull, clear as a bell, the way you hear your own name spoken in a crowded hall. I have never been able to explain it. I have stopped trying. He staggered. She hit him again, backhand on the return, and he went down. And a second was already on her, and I was still half the vault away, and I ran and I ran, and I was not going to be in time. And I want you to understand that I did not yet know what she was to me. I only knew that a woman I owed everything and had given nothing was about to die for my children in front of me, and that was enough. That would always have been enough. I came into the reavers like the mountain coming down a second time. I will not give you the shape of it. I do not have it to give. There is a red place a wolf goes at the last extremity, when everything he is and loves stands one heartbeat from ending, and I went into that place, and I do not remember climbing out of it in any order. There was a red time. When it ended, the reavers who had come through the breach were down, all of them, and behind me the breach was choked with my own warriors pouring up out of the yard, Osric's voice a roar over all of it, and the gray tide had been shoved, for one held breath, at a terrible price, back out into the pass. And Neve was on her knees in the rubble with her arms around 3 of the smallest pups, and the front of her plain gray dress was dark and going darker, and she was looking down into the faces of the children she held with an expression of such gentle, exhausted, complete relief, that for a moment I did not understand what I was seeing. She had put herself in the path of a north knife. She had taken it into her own body so that a pup would not. And she had held on even now, even as the strength drained out of her one slow handspan at a time. She had not let go of the children. I reached her as her arms began, at last, to loosen. I have them. My voice came out of me strange, cracked, not a king's voice at all. Let go, I have them now, you can let go, I have them. She lifted her face to me. And that is when it happened. That is when the bond woke, not before, not across a crowded distance, not in some grand, clean sweep of destiny declaring itself over the heads of a watching hall. It woke when I came near enough to catch her. It woke when my two hands closed over her two hands to take the weight of the pups she would not drop. It woke when I looked down into the face of a stranger, in the precise instant I was about to lose her out of the world forever. I have tried many times since to say what it was because she asks me to, and I can refuse her nothing, and I fail every time, but I will fail at it once more for you. It was not a fire. Everyone expects the fire. Every story wants the fire. It was the opposite of a fire. It was as though I had lived the whole of my life with a sound in my ears so constant I had never once known it was there, the low grinding noise of a man who is alone, and all at once it stopped. The war stopped. Not truly. The war went on all around us. I know it did. I could see men's mouths stretched with shouting an arm's length away. But I could no longer hear it. I could hear one thing only, one, and it was her heartbeat, faltering and slow and far, far too quiet. And as I knelt there in the rubble with my hands over hers, my own heart lurched in my chest, and stumbled, and then, and I will swear this over any grave you set before me, my own heart caught up the failing rhythm of hers and began to beat in time with it. Two hearts, one beat, hers weakening, and mine bound now, following it down toward the dark. My wolf that had been nothing but a war animal for 91 days, a thing of teeth and cold and the holding of lines, went down inside me, not still, not silent, undone, broken open. It understood, whole and instant, the thing my mind was only that moment beginning to grasp, that the woman bleeding to death in the wreck of my own hall, the nameless refugee I had judged merely useful and never troubled to know, was my fated mate. Mine. The one my counsel had begun to whisper I would never find. The one I had told them coldly that a king at war had no need of. Sent to me across a whole winter of blood, walked in through my own gate in the autumn carrying an old woman's pack, set to labor by fate not 30 feet beneath my boots, and I had stood up on the wall through all of it and never known. And now I was going to lose her before I had spoken to her one single word that was worth the breath. No, I said. Only that. To the war, to the mountain, to the moon herself, to whatever power had waited until this exact, this unbearable moment to hand her to me. No. Osric was suddenly at my shoulder, gripping it. Havard, the breach they'll reform. We have to close it, we have to. Hold it without me. My king. Hold it without me. I did not look at him. I could not have looked away from her face if the whole mountain had come down on the two of us. Get the pups to the deep vault. Get my brother. Hold the breach if it costs the last of the pack, and if you cannot hold it, seal it, and if you cannot seal it, you fall back to the inner keep and you fire the stair behind you, and through all of it, none of it, do you hear me, Osric, none of it comes near this woman. She is your Luna. She has been your Luna since the autumn, and none of us knew it, least of all me. Now go and buy me the time to keep her in the world. I have led men in battle the whole of my life. I have never once been obeyed the way Osric obeyed me in that moment. I felt him go rigid. I heard him take one breath, and then he turned and began to bellow, and my pack answered, 40 voices, then 100, the whole exhausted, furious mass of them going up around the breach like a wall of their own making, and I forgot every one of them because Neve's eyes were closing. Look at me. I had her out of the rubble now, gathered into my arms, and she weighed nothing. She weighed like a bird, like the bundle of gray cloth I had mistaken her for across the vault, and her breath had gone to a thread. Neve. Look at me. Her eyes opened. She had heard her name, and a thing I did not have time to feel then but have felt every day since, went through me like a second knife. That it might have been a very long time in this cold and desperate place since anyone had said her name to her at all. You know my name, she whispered, and I could not believe it. I have never stopped being unable to believe it. There was the faintest ghost of dry amusement in it. That's new. I know your name. My throat closed on it. I know it now, and I'll know it every dawn I have left to me. I swear that to you, The little ones. Her hand rose and found my wrist and closed on it, though the strength in her fingers was already going. The little ones, are they? Safe, everyone, you saved them. You saved all of them, Neve. Now please let me save you. I don't think, she said, and she said it so gently, so reasonably, the way a patient woman corrects a child who has gotten his some wrong. I don't think you can. And her heart beneath my ruined hearing missed, then missed again, and mine, roped to hers now, buckled and tried to follow her down into the cold. I have never told any living soul the whole of what I did in the hour that came next, because I have never found the words for the half of it, and I will not find them now, but I will tell you what I can. The bond that had woken in me was not only a knowing. It was a tether, a living cord, and I can call it nothing better than moon silver, running from the center of my chest to the center of hers, and along it I could feel her sliding away from me, down and out, into a cold that had no bottom and no name. And I did the only thing that a mate can do, the thing our very oldest tales speak of, and that I had all my life dismissed as a story told to comfort grieving children. I set the whole of my will against her dying. I turned myself into a doorway and I poured myself down the tether into her, my strength, my heat, the blood warmth of a body that had refused for 91 days to lie down and die. I poured every scrap of it into the woman in my arms, and I took hold of the moon silver cord with everything I was, and I would not let go. Stay, I said, my mouth against her temple, her hair, the cooling skin of her. You don't get to do this, do you hear me? You don't get to be the bravest thing I have ever seen in my life and then leave it before I've so much as thanked you. Stay, breathe, I have you. Feel that? I pressed my hand flat to her breastbone over the terrible, slow stumble of her heart. That's mine. That's my heart. It's yours now. I've given it to you. It won't beat without yours anymore, so you'll simply have to keep yours going, won't you? You'll simply have to stay. For my sake, if not your own. Stay. Stay. I do not know how long I knelt there in the rubble with the war raging 10 feet off. Time did not run in its ordinary way inside the bond. I know that at some point both my hands were red past the wrist where I pressed them to the wound. I know that at some point the old healer of the Undercroft was on her knees beside me. The same old woman Neve had carried a pack for, up the pass, in the autumn. And that she took one look at what I was doing and went white to the lips, and then did not try to stop me. She only worked alongside me, her old sure hands packing and binding the wound while I held the soul inside the body by main force, and once, only once, she looked up at me with her old eyes streaming and said, "Lo, keep hold of her, my king. You keep hold. I'll do the rest." And I kept hold. And above us and around us, unseen by me, the pack turned the battle, and this part I did not witness and must give you as it was given to me by Osric, and by the whole hold every winter since when the first snow comes and they tell it again. When my warriors understood what was happening at the heart of the breach, when it went through the pack the way word goes through a pack, faster than any shout, mouth to mind to blood, that the king had found his mate at last and she was dying in his arms in the rubble, something woke in them that the Reavers had no counter to and no name for. For 91 days my people had fought to hold a wall of gray stone. Now, all at once, they fought for their Luna's life. There is no fury under the moon to match it. Osric, who feared nothing living, told me, an old man himself by then, that he had never in a long, hard life seen anything like the way the pack hit the Reavers in that breach. He said it was not like men fighting. He said it was like the mountain itself deciding, after 91 days of being climbed and battered and broken, to at last stand up and fight back. Men who had been half dead on their feet an hour before drove the Reavers back out of the breach and back down the rubble and back into the pass, and did not stop driving them, and drove them out of the very mouth of the pass and did not stop even then, until the last northern torch had guttered out into the falling dark and the horns, those flat, patient, certain horns that had promised us our ending since dusk fell, at long last, silent. We won the war that night, the pass held. Every valley behind it stayed green and safe and unburned. All of it. Every hearth and den and gentle place my father had died to keep and his mother before him. All of it saved. Because a nameless woman decided that 40 children she had no blood claim on were worth the whole of her one life. And because a broken pack that had nothing left to give found, in the sight of her falling, one last unbreakable reason to stand. Die to win, Osric said to me once many years on, an old man watching Neve teach our own small daughter to set a splint with an ashboard by the fire. She was ready to die, lad, and that is the only reason any of us lived. He said it like a benediction. He was not wrong. But I have got ahead of the part that matters most. Let me go back to the rubble, and the old healer's sure hands, and the heartbeat I would not release. She did not die. I want to be very careful how I tell this, because I have heard it told wrong, told grander than it was. I have heard bards give her a waking in a burst of moon-silver fire, a stunned and bowing pack, a Luna risen shining from the dead. It was nothing like that, and I am fiercely glad it was nothing like that, because the truth was slower and quieter and 1,000-fold more precious than any bard's bright lie. Her heartbeat held inside the cage of mine did not stop. Somewhere in that timeless red hour it stopped falling away from me. It steadied. It became a low, stubborn, unhurried thing. And then, so gradually that I dared not let myself believe it, so gradually that I held my own breath for fear of tipping the balance, it began, beat by beat, to climb. And the old healer, feeling it under her fingers as she bound the last of the packing, looked up at me with the tears cutting clean bright tracks through the stone dust and the blood on her old face, and she said, "The knife didn't reach the deep of her, my king. Praise the moon and your own stubborn heart. If she takes no fever now, if she takes no fever, she'll wake." She took fever. Of course she took fever. That was the second war, and it was in its way the worse of the two, because in the first I had the whole pack at my back, and in the second I had only myself, and it lasted 4 days and 4 nights, and I fought every hour of it. Let me give you those 4 days, because I promised her once I would never let anyone tell this story as if the wound was the end of it and the waking the next line. The 4 days were the story. The 4 days were where I truly earned her, if I earned her at all. They carried her down into the deep vault, past the well, into the stone heart of the mountain where the pups had sheltered, the safest place in all the hold now that the near vault was open sky. They made her a low cot of what could be spared, and they built a fire because the deep stone held the cold, and they gave her into the old healer's keeping. And I would not leave. I want to be plain about it. My pack had just won the greatest victory in 3 generations, and their king would not come up out of a dark vault to so much as look at it. Osric came to me on the first night, still bloody from the pass, and told me the reavers were broken, fled, scattered back into the north, that scouts were sent, that the valleys were warned and safe, that Stormwatch had held and would hold, and I heard all of it the way a man half asleep hears weather through a wall. I said without looking up from her, "Good. Set the watch. See to the wounded. Send my brother down when he's able." And I turned back to her, and Osric, who had served 3 alphas and buried 2, stood behind me a long moment in the firelight, and then put his old hand on my shoulder once and left me to it. The first night she burned so hot the fever came off her like heat off a hearthstone, and she did not know me or know anything, only turned her head on the folded cloak and spoke in a low, urgent stream to people who were not there. She was back in the undercroft in her fever. She was moving the pups. Over and over all through that first black night, she tried to move the pups. "Deeper," she'd murmur, plucking at the blanket at my sleeve. "Take them deeper, the roof. Not that way, the far vault past the well. Where's the little one with the cough? Has anyone got the little one with the cough?" And I held her hands and told her, over and over, that the little one with the cough was safe, that all the little ones were safe and deep and warm, that she had done it. She had gotten them deep. She could rest. And she could not hear me, and she went on trying to save children who were already saved all night in the dark. And I have never in my life felt anything to match the helplessness of it, or the love. Because it was love by then. I want to say the word plainly and not hide it inside grander ones. Somewhere in that first burning night, holding the hands of a delirious woman who did not know I was there, listening to her fret and fret over the safety of other people's children with the last strength in her fevered body, I fell so wholly and finally in love with Neve that there has never since been the smallest question of it, and never will be. Not with the bond. The bond only opened the door. I walked through it myself, on the first night of her fever, and I have never once looked back toward it. Emmerich came down on the second day, pale, a bandage on his own arm, and stood in the firelight looking at her. She stood in front of us, he said, low. His voice was not steady. I had my blade out, Havard, I swear I did. I'd have fought, but she stepped in front of all of us with that stick. She didn't even look afraid. She looked at the Reaver like he was a pot boiling over that she meant to see to, and he stopped. He was 16, and he had watched a woman take a knife meant to reach past her to him, and there is no age at which a soul carries that lightly. Will she live? Yes, I said. I made myself say it like a king says a thing that must therefore be true. She will live. Sit with me. Talk to her. She learned all your names, do you know that? Every soul in this hold. Talk to her and use your name so that even in the fever some part of her knows a friend is near. He said. He talked to her, my grave young brother, for hours in the deep vault about small nothings, the way she had once talked a weeping boy into laughing, and I understood, watching him, that she had taught him that too, without either of them ever knowing it, simply by being what she was under his eyes for one long winter. The second night was the worst. Her fever climbed past anything the old healer had a remedy for, and the cool cloths did nothing, and for a black hour past midnight her breath went shallow and fast, and her heartbeat, which I never once stopped listening to through the bond, began again to skitter and drop, and I did again what I had done in the rubble. I opened the tether wide and I poured myself down it, my own health, my own strength, and I took her fever heat back up the cord into my own body where I could bear it and she could not. And I will not pretend I understood the working of it, only that it was real, that the old healer watched me burn with a borrowed fever through the blackest hour of that night, and shook her head, and said no living thing should be able to do what she was watching me do, and that toward dawn Neve's breath eased. And her heart climbed back, and the crisis passed by a hair, and I sat there shaking and sick with her borrowed fire and glad past speaking, to be the one who bore it in her place. I did not sleep those 4 days. Emmerich brought me broth and I did not drink it. Osric came with the business of a hold that had just won a war and needed its king, and I gave him what I could without lifting my hand from her, and mostly I gave him leave to be king in my stead, and he was. And Stormwatch did not fall for one of me because Osric held it together with his old scarred hands, and let his king keep the vigil that his king could not have been dragged from by wild horses. On the third day she was quieter. The fever had not broken, but it had banked like a fire settling to coals, and she slept a truer sleep, and once, only once in the afternoon in the firelight, she surfaced far enough to open her eyes a slit and they found me. I do not know how much she saw or knew, but her cracked lips moved and I bent close, and what she said was, "You're still here." And I said, "I'm still here." And she closed her eyes again with something that on a well face would have been a smile, and sank back down into the sleep, and I sat there with my heart breaking and mending at once, and thought that I would say those 3 words to her every day of my life if the moon would only let her live to hear them. I'm still here. The 4th night the fever broke. I felt it go. I had my hand over her heart, as I had kept it near enough the whole 4 days, and I felt her heartbeat shed all at once the ragged skittering edge it had carried since the rubble, and slow, and deepen, and settle into the long, even rhythm of true and healing sleep. And at the same moment, I felt the moon-silver tether between us go slack for the first time since it had woken. Not because it had failed, because she no longer needed me holding her up on it. She could stand on it herself now. She could carry her own heartbeat again. She was going to live, and she was going to live under her own strength, and the bond between us had gone quiet the way a rope goes quiet when both ends are at last standing on solid ground. I put my face down against the edge of her cot, there in the deep dark of the mountain, alone, and I wept. I had not wept since I was younger than Emric. Kings do not, or are told they do not. I wept then the way the wall of a dam weeps when the flood behind it finally sinks, all at once, and without any dignity at all, and for a long time, and no one saw it, and I have never for one day of my life been ashamed of it. She woke at dawn. I had lifted my head at some point in the gray hour, and I was watching her face by the last of the firelight and the first thin light coming down the vault stair, and I saw her eyes open. I saw her come back into herself, saw the moment she remembered where she was, and then the moment, half a breath behind it, that she remembered what had happened, the breach, the children, the knife. And I saw her turn her head, weak and slow on the folded cloak, and find me there, the alpha king of the Ashfell pack, filthy, unshaven, gaunt, hollow-eyed, kneeling on the cold stone by a refugee's cot, and very plainly not having left it in days. She looked at me for a long moment out of clear eyes. The fever was gone from them. She was herself again, whoever that self truly was, the self I had never bothered to learn. "You're still here," she said. Her voice was a thread, but it was her own voice, dry and even in hers. "I'm still here. The little ones, of course. Of course that was the first thing, the same as it had been the last thing in the rubble. The little ones. Every one of them alive," I said. "Every one safe. Loud. Impossible. Underfoot. Driving the old healer to distraction and asking after you by name 3 times a day. You have made yourself the most beloved soul in this whole hold, Neve, and I don't believe you have the first idea of it." Her brow creased, that gentle, patient, correcting look, the one that told a child he'd gotten the sum wrong. "I'm nobody," she said. "I bind wounds. I came up the pass in the autumn with the others. I only did what wanted." "Neve." I said her name, and I watched it land on her the way it had landed in the rubble, that small startle, that flinch of a soul unaccustomed to being known, being named, being seen. And it undid me a little again, as it had the first time, and I resolved in that moment that I would say her name to her so often for so many years, that she would forget she had ever gone a winter without hearing it. "I have to tell you a thing," I said, "and I have made a poor and shameful start of everything to do with you, so let me at least tell this part plainly once, while it is only the 2 of us and there's no pack about to bow and make a legend of it and frighten you off. You are not nobody. You have never once been nobody. You are my mate. The moon made you for me and me for you, and she sent you up that pass in the autumn carrying an old woman's burden, and she set you to work with your own 2 hands not 30 feet beneath where I stood, and I was so busy being a king that I never felt the other half of my own soul walk in through my own gate. I did not know you. I did not know your name. I learned it the night you lay dying in my arms, and that is my great and lasting shame, and I will spend the whole rest of my life making it good to you. But I need you to hear the truth of it now. I am bound to you. I have been since the wall came down. When your heart very nearly stopped, mine tried to stop with it, and I held yours going inside my own chest for an hour in the rubble and 4 days in this vault, and I would do it again for 400 years and count it the best spent time of my life. I am not telling you this to bind you. Hear that too. You are free. You were always free, you proved it in the breach, with nothing but a mending stick in your hands and a clear road to safety behind you, and you chose 40 children over your own life without a heartbeat's hesitation. You are the freest soul I have ever known. I only need you to hear from my own mouth that you are, and have been all along, all winter, every unnoticed day of it, wanted, chosen, not for your usefulness, not for what your hands can do, though the moon knows I've watched them do miracles, chosen for what you are." She was quiet for a long time, long enough that fear began to move in me, long enough that I began to think I had bungled even this, even the one thing I had 4 days to think how to say. Then she said, "I felt it." Felt what? When the knife, her hand rose slow toward the bandage bound across her shoulder and breast, and I caught it gently and folded it into my own and held it against the coverlet. When I fell, there was cold. I told you I didn't think you could save me. I wasn't being brave saying that. I want you to know. I'd made my peace before I ever stepped in front of them. I'd decided, in the half second I saw the Reavers come through and the little ones cut off, I'd decided that if it came to my life, then it came to my life, and that 40 children was a good and full thing to spend one on, better than most lives get to be spent. So I wasn't afraid. And then there was the cold, and I was going down into it, and I was ready, and then there was. She stopped. Her clear eyes came up to mine, and there was wonder in them now, plain wonder, and beneath the wonder something else that turned my ruined heart over in my chest. There was a rope, a warm rope, and someone had hold of the other end of it and they would not let go. I remember thinking, even going down, even most of the way gone, I remember thinking, whoever this is, they're stubborn as the whole mountain, they won't let me go, and I don't even know who they are. And I remember thinking, they want me to live so badly, I might as well try. Her fingers tightened in mine, weak but sure. That was you. That was me. You held me, it was barely a question. I would have held you, I said, until the mountain wore down to sand and the moon went out. I mean to hold you now for the whole of both our lives if you'll have it. And if you won't, if the bond is nothing you asked for and nothing you want, and you'd rather go down the pass in the spring a free woman with a whole pack in your debt, then I'll grieve it every day I have left, but I will still be glad, every single one of those days, that when the choosing came, the moon let me be the one on the other end of the rope. Neve, my Neve, who had faced armed Reavers with a healer's splint and faced her own death with her peace already made and quiet in her, looked at the Alpha King kneeling ruined and unshaven and weeping-eyed at her bedside, and she did the bravest and the simplest thing I have ever seen a living soul do. She lifted my hand that was holding hers, and she turned it, and she pressed her cheek against the back of it, and she closed her eyes, and she let herself, for the first time in the whole of a hard life spent holding everyone else, be held. Then hold on, she said, I'm still here. I have thought, across all the good long years since, about how the hold received her, because I know what the tales want to make of it. The stunned court, the reversal, the enemies of the poor scorned girl brought low at last to bow before their new Luna. And I will give you the truth instead, because the truth is better, and because Neve would climb out of any tale that tried to give her the other thing. There was no grand unveiling. A pack keeps no secrets from itself. The story of the king in the breach had gone through Stormwatch in the first hour of that night, and by the time Neve was strong enough, weeks later, to climb the long stair up out of the deep vault leaning on my arm, for she would not yet be carried, she has never in her life gone easily to being carried. The whole hold already knew whose life had turned the war. So there was no ceremony where a shamed court fell silent. There was something better. She came up the stair on my arm into a yard full of her pack going about the slow, cold, patient work of rebuilding a wall that a mountain had broken. And one by one, as they saw her, they stopped. Not to bow. She would have been mortified past speech to be bowed to, and they knew it, because she had learned all their names and they had learned, at last, hers. And you do not bow to a woman who has sat at your father's deathbed and made your frightened son laugh. They stopped, and they set down their stones and their mortar, and they came. The mothers of the pups she had shielded came first and could not speak and only took her hands, and then everyone came, the whole hold, the whole surviving pack, filing past the woman not one of them had troubled to name for a winter, and each of them said it now. Neve. Thank you, Neve. Bless you, Neve. Luna. Until she was weeping and laughing at once, and had to sit down hard on a fallen block of the very wall she'd bled to save, with 3 pups already scrambling into her lap and a 4th attempting the climb. And here is the small, true, quiet justice that I keep, and that I will hand to you in place of the grand humbling of enemies that the legends so love, because it is a better justice, and it has outlived them all. There were some among my own people who had, all that long winter, walked past that refugee woman as though she were a fixture of the undercroft, a thing like a table or a lamp. Not cruel, most of them, only careless, only certain in the untroubled way of the comfortable that she was no one who signified. I watched those same souls come up the yard to take her hand and thank her, and I watched it dawn on each of them, one by one, exactly what they had walked past every single day for 91 days, and I did not need to shame a one of them. Their own understanding shamed them, deep and quiet and lasting, in a way no king's rebuke ever could have, and it made them kind. For the rest of their lives it made them kind, kind past all reason to every nameless, weary, unregarded soul who ever afterward came up our pass out of the north with a pack on each shoulder and no demand in their mouth. That is a finer justice than any bowing enemy. That is a justice that outlives the moment and does its slow good work down the generations. And it is Neve's, and she made it without ever once meaning to, the way she made everything. We were bonded under the first full moon, after the wall was mended. I will not describe it. Some things belong to a marriage and not to a tale, and this is the chief of them. I will tell you only that when I spoke the words that bound me to her, before all my people, under the moon in the mended yard, I did not speak them as a king claiming a Luna to strengthen his line. I spoke them as a man who had been given, undeservedly, against the whole running of the cold world, one more chance to say aloud a name he ought to have learned in the autumn. And she gave me hers back, plain and even and unafraid, the way she does all things, and the pack that had won a war for her sake stood witness while their king came, finally, at long and stumbling last, all the way home. She keeps her ash-board splints in a basket by our own hearth to this day. She never gave up the work. She goes down to the undercroft still, a warm and living place now, no vault of the dying any longer but a hall of healing and of birth, and she binds wounds with her own 2 hands, because she says a Luna who forgets the work has forgotten her pack, and a pack that is forgotten does not stand when the wall breaks. Our daughter has her mother's steadiness, and the moon help us all my own stubbornness, which fate must have thought a fine joke to braid together in one small girl. Neve is teaching her to set a splint, and Emric, grown now, gray coming at his temples, steady as the stone himself, is teaching her to hold a wall, the very thing I once forbade him. The valleys behind the pass are green. They have stayed green every year. No gray tide has come again out of the north in my lifetime, and when it comes in some other king's, there will be a mended wall to meet it, and a hold that remembers every winter exactly what a wall is for and exactly what it costs to hold one. And every year, when the first snow comes down through the pass, white now and clean and quiet, no longer black with the cinders of that terrible night, I do the same small private thing I have done since the year the tower fell. I find her wherever she is in the hold, at the hearth or in the healing hall or out in the yard with a pup on her hip, and I put my hand to the old scar at her shoulder, the one the north knife left, that the moon bond and a stubborn king between them would not permit to be the end of her, and I feel her heartbeat under my palm, low, even, unhurried, sure. That heartbeat I carried inside my own chest through the worst night of my life when it faltered and I would not let it fall. And she lets me, she always lets me. She says nothing, because after all these years there is nothing left that needs the saying, but she covers my hand with her own and holds it there against the beat of her own heart, and we stand a moment together in the first snow, the woman who was ready to die for children not her own, and the man who found her one heartbeat too late and would not let that heartbeat be the last. And every single year, standing so, I think the same 3 words. The ones I said to her in the rubble and in the vault and mean to go on saying until the moon puts one of us down and then the other. The truest 3 words I have ever owned. Still here, still here, still here.